Hello and welcome you all. We welcome together in our studio Deborah, Tavares. I got a lot of emails that you wanted Deborah back. You wanted her to speak a little bit more about things that are happening today, the things that are about to come. So she agreed to come with us on a show. Thank you, Deborah. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Well, Yana, again, thank you for inviting me back. I think I'm doing similarly to what many people are doing, and that's not well, if you understand what is. And dependent on the degree of what you understand, the state of our moment-to-moment life right now is based on what we know, and it's painful and difficult information. And I would like, of course, for everyone to know, again, I am Deborah Tavares, and I run a couple of major websites. Our primary website is called StopTheCrime.net, and I would urge everyone to please subscribe to the website, go to our video YouTube channel, and also tap the bell notifications so that you will get community posts and other information that we send out. Also, our other website, and they're both equally important, is called primarywater.org, and we will be discussing some of the water events that have happened recently in Michigan with the dams being breached. But I think I'd like to just start out with one of the community posts that's an example. If you tap your bell notification and subscribe to our website, that you would find out about. And maybe many of you know about this, and maybe many of you do not. But it's an extremely important U.S. Department of Defense release dated May the 28th of 2020. And I'm just going to do a synopsis of this. The Department of Defense and the U.S. Air Force Warfare Center is to build a 5G network. It's a test prototype of software at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. And again, they've teamed up, and they are building this 5G both for defense and, they say, civilian uses. Now, I want to underscore right here and right now, you need to interpret these releases and understand we are the enemy. This is a battlefield that has been conscripted now, and it is a silent weapons system of warfare. So I'm going to go a little bit more into this release. It talks about how the Defense Department recognizes 5G technology is vital to maintaining America's military and economic advantages. And that so says Dr. Joseph Evans of the Department of Defense. He's, by the way, the technical director for 5G and the lead for the department's 5G development effort. Again, his name is Dr. Joseph Evans. And he quotes by saying, "We expect to start construction on the network at Nellis Air Force Base in July of 2020 and have it fully operational in January of 2021. So what is it? What is going to be fully operational and used against us? Well, let's read what they're going to do. They're creating a network that will feature full relocatable cell towers that can be set up and taken down in less than an hour. And they talk about how they may incorporate, and in fact they will incorporate, human-machine interfaces, which go beyond simple graphic user interfaces and will include audio, gestures, augmented reality devices, and haptics, and simulate touch and motion. And again, this is going to be testing, unleashed, and experimented with and used at Nellis Air Force Base, and it will be used upon all of us and ready in 2021. And again, this is going up on StopTheCrime.net under our community posts. So when you subscribe, these are the kinds of things that you can and will receive. And I don't always get to cover these on different programs or ways in which I get information out. So that's an additional way to get some of the stories that I may not have time to say on air. But right now, of course, we're in this massive COVID simulation, or I should say takedown of the global populations. And I want to alert all of you to an extremely important Rockefeller Foundation document that's dated Tuesday, April the 21st of 2020. I'm going to give you the title of this document so that you can find it for yourselves. It's entitled National COVID-19 Testing Action Plan, Pragmatic Steps to Reopen Our Workplaces and Our Communities. Now keep in mind, the Rockefeller Foundation is saying our communities as if they live in them. They do not. I have to say that as discovered in the Chilean Revolution, when they were destroying lives of the Chilean people, and that's in my last COVID YouTube video that I have up on StopTheCrime.net, you find out while we are being pummeled and jobs being taken, we are going bankrupt, and certainly all being affected worldwide right now, the powerful are living the life unabated by all of this. They are enjoying their lives. And there was an undercover operation in Chile that showed the difference between those living in the camps and dying of malnutrition and those that were enjoying the life without any repercussions of what the government was doing to them. And this was a plan in Chile, and it's happening here in the United States and worldwide as well. So I refer you to my last YouTube video to go in greater detail over that. But I want to just make some special comments about this National COVID-19 Testing Action Plan. Again, the pragmatic steps to reopen our workplaces and our communities. And I'll spend more time on this in a video, but I want to read to you this, which is on page 8. It says, monitoring the pandemic and adjusting social distancing measures will require launching the largest public health testing program in America's history. Successful implementation of a national plan to fast-track COVID-19 testing should allow the country to reopen and respond to recurrent outbreaks. The effect will ultimately grow to billions of dollars, this is money, to billions of dollars per month, although innovations in testing technology will eventually drop cost. But with widespread business closures costing the country $350 billion to $400 billion each month, the expense of this testing plan will be worth it. This testing infrastructure, I repeat, this testing infrastructure is intended to tide the country over until a vaccine or therapy is widely available. And they go on to talk about the coordination of such a massive program would be treated as a wartime effort. A wartime effort.
Wow.
With a public-private bipartisan pandemic testing board. So all of you are going to want to look at the pandemic testing board information, which was established to assist and serve as a bridge between local, state, and federal officials with the logistical investment and political challenges this operation will inevitably face. And they go on to talk about individuals involved, colleges involved, institutions involved, and they say they recommend a combination of federal and state appointed members who would actively serve throughout the crisis. And I can only say to you that everything that is occurring is a scenario plan in advance, every single thing. And that would include the footage that we have all seen, or many of us now have seen, of George Floyd.
Yes.
And I would encourage all of you to search, as I do, the scenario plan behind that. Because again, the Sustainable Development Plans, which are genocide plans, massive reduction of human population, and the massive disconnect to our ability to have resources such as food and water and electricity. This is a plan. It's genocide. So everything is a pre-plan. Everything. In fact, it's interesting, Yana, because just before the COVID shut down all the theaters here in my area, the last movie we saw, the last night the theater was open and there was no one else in the theater but my husband and I, we saw the movie The Hunt. So I would recommend that everybody take a look at that. You will find out, you will hear that they do say that the government is a business, which it is. And you will watch how they hunt people on a large estate, and think of the large estate as being the world, because that is what is now. We are all being hunted. So I want to go over some of the participants in this Rockefeller Foundation. Massive tagging, testing, and this is a Stasi reporting way in which people that are unemployed now will have jobs. They will become COVID testers. And we know about that because that is now being solicited for jobs now. And it is a NARC program. And see something, say something, report it. And that is why we know people just outside of Paris in France, in Cologne, or not in Cologne, in Champagne, that can't even go out of their house. The stay-in-place orders are different everywhere. And they have, while they do have a small outside backyard, they're not able to step out of their house. If they do, their neighbors take photographs of them and report them. This is where it differs from country to country, the level of the confinement that people are being put in and under. So I want to go over some of the participants with the Rockefeller Foundation so that you'll understand the enormity of the takedown in the United States and worldwide, and this is very important. I'm going to name the names of these, and there are individual names, but I'm going to only name the foundations or schools that they're from, and this is on page 26 of that Rockefeller Foundation document. And I say this: Harvard University, the Yale University, Johns Hopkins University, again Yale, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Chicago, the Advancement of Science, the American Association for the Advancement of Science is involved, the New York Times. Now you've got to ask yourself, why is a newspaper involved? And you have to understand what it tells us in the NASA document that I've talked about for many years, it's on my website, that you need to understand on page 93 of the NASA document. It tells us that the United States, which is called CONUS in that document, CONUS, that CNN will exploit. There will be, it's called the exploit CNN syndrome. They will sink carriers via swarm attacks, capture, torture Americans in living color on prime time. Think about George Floyd. Torture, capture Americans in living color on prime time. Terror attacks within the United States using binary bioweapons. They will attack critical infrastructure. Take down. They will use EMP, electromagnetic pulse, RF, which is frequencies against our brains. Serious cyber and collateral damage exploitation. This is the purpose of the media. And you heard me read to you out of this Rockefeller Foundation document, the New York Times. Also, of course, the Rockefeller Foundation is involved, that's listed. The National Cancer Institute, gotta wonder, Duke University, Bethesda University, and the University of Minnesota. It's most important to understand the enormity of how this has come down upon us, and I've just only gone over a few of the participants. There are many participants in the long-range scenario planning of the demise of the United States and the rest of the nations worldwide. This is a plan. So most important, all of the disruption that you see happening, particularly when you see things happening that just cascade like dominoes falling at one time, such as the COVID lockdown restrictions that happened worldwide within a 2-month period of time. Scenario planning, all in advance. And I go over the Rockefeller Foundation on the scenario planning of the COVID and what will ensue. And this is most important for everyone to go, again, to stopthecrime.net, go to our video YouTube channel, and please watch the 3-part YouTube that we put up with better sound quality. I had an initial one that didn't have great sound quality. Please share all the videos. You have our permission to pass them along, whatever you would like to do. Our main goal is to get this information out far and wide. It is with great pain, I must say, and truth trauma that we go through these documents and find out about this information and need everyone's help that is listening to get this out, get this information out as far and wide as possible. And so I will say a few more things about the NASA document, and I'm looking forward, actually, Anna and Steve, to do several programs going over this, because it is speaking to the time we're in, and I will just discuss that right now. But I wanted to tell you something that I thought of and put together a number of years ago on how I felt about all of this, and I think many of you listening may feel the same way. And here is my quote: to believe the unimaginable, move into a new reality, manage the unthinkable when so many others are unaware is the challenge of our time. And I have that quote on my flyers that you can download for free from stopthecrime.net, and I urge you to download the flyers and share them far and wide. And all the information, again, is completely available to all of you, and we wish you to share it far and wide. I'm going to go over a few points in the NASA document, and then I'm going to be not only talking about what is behind what we're seeing, but my concern right now is an enormous concern about the taking down of the grid, the nation's electric grid.
Yes, Deborah, before you move on, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can you make it very clear to people that we do not have the government? You see, there is division right now among Christians. Those who know that we do not have a government, and those who still believe that President Trump is on their side and he's going to do some sort of a miracle and stand up, for Constitution and for human rights, and he's going to fix it all. And many pastors of evangelical church are involved in taking this path of trusting Trump, President Trump. They are going down this road, and many people are not getting ready. They do not understand that he's controlled opposition. He's part of this plan, and we don't have a government. This is them against us, and Trump is part of the elites or the cabal, and he is basically going, listening to their orders. And it might seem that he says something they like to hear, but he does not live up to his promises. And what he does is just tricking people and taking them just down this destruction path. Can you please make it very clear to people we don't have a government?
Well, I understand what you're saying, Yana, and I will tell everyone that's listening my story about understanding that, because it's only coming from my understanding of that I can articulate what you're going to hear me say. Foundationally, that became the key pillar of my understanding all of the rest of the predictive programming that has occurred. It was understanding the factual reality of the government and that we don't have a government. And one of my early reads, now again, I will recommend some reads to you, and I would recommend that you do read them. It does not mean that everything that is presented in these books that you'll hear me say is fully my position entirely, but primarily yes. So what I'm saying is make up your own minds with what you hear me say and learn. But I will tell you, when I learned what I learned about the government, it changed my life forever. And it really was an extremely PTSD moment for me. It went against everything I had been taught in school, everything I ever knew. And it ultimately, because I am extremely hesitant to believe things, I must see things in writing, I must prove things for myself. And it started for me when a retired neurologist friend of ours sent us some information on the internet. And I thought, oh, that's just part of an internet scheme. And basically it said something like the Department of Defense gave Congress, gave the authority to the Department of Defense to use chemicals and biologicals on the American civilian population without our knowledge or consent. Now, I will tell you at the time, back in the 90s, when I was in Southern California, we were being flown over by black helicopters spraying different types of toxic chemicals, presumably for the fruit fly problem that we were having down there. At the time, I did not know about Operation Sea Spray, SEA Spray. It was an operation in the 50s that they did over San Francisco. And I will let all of you look these up. I had no idea that our government was doing this to us. And when I met up with a group in the United States and had frequent conversations with them, we talked about this together, and it took camaraderie of other people, actually, for me to finally understand what I now will start to tell you. And I'm going to use some props for this because I find it easier for me to articulate this and to give you some reference material at the same time. Now, while there's many reference material that you can go to, I would recommend that all of you take a look at Senate Report 93549 and understand how we are the enemy, and that what parens patriae means, which means the government is our parent. But I want to go over, because I met James Traficant at a conference about maybe 2 years before he died in this tragic tractor accident in his barn. And I'm looking at his book right now, which is entitled America's Last Minuteman. And he said he was a quarterback, a congressman, a convict, and a political prisoner. And what I'm going to refer to right now is at the very beginning of his book, and he put into Congressional Record what you're going to hear me read to you now, and this is most important. He said, the bankruptcy of the United States Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993, volume 33, page H 1303. Speaker, Representative James Traficant, Jr., Ohio, addressing the House. Quote, James Traficant said this, Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in the world's history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it's a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9th, 1933. He gives the statute, and I won't go over that. Declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent. The 73rd Congress in session on June 5th of 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Again, all United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under the emergency war powers. Again, the federal government exists in name only. Now, it became easier for me to accept this, as enormous as the concept was for me at the time, by having attended hundreds upon hundreds of meetings. Not only city council meetings and board of supervisors meetings, but water meetings, vaccination meetings, meetings where the counties wanted to fluoridate the water supply, going all the way down to San Francisco to what they call One Bay Area, which was the consolidation of the counties into one, and opposing that with hundreds of other people, going to the California Public Utility Commission meetings, and many of the Pacific Gas and Electric meetings, and so many meetings, I can't remember all the meetings I've attended. But one of the common threads of attending all those meetings is that I started to see that there was an autopilot in place. No matter how many citizens like myself would go to these meetings and try to present an extremely important reason why the meeting or the agenda item should not be approved, they were all approved anyway. And I couldn't understand that. Everybody was scratching their heads. They would leave these meetings not understanding what happened. Why weren't they being listened to? And that's important. What I then discovered after going directly into the city documents, I discovered why they gave public speaking opportunities in the first place. And that was to continue to create the illusion that we had an opportunity to voice our opinion. It was a psychological maneuver to allow us to speak. And many of you may have wondered, well, why are you only given 3 minutes to speak? Why are you sometimes only given 2 minutes, or even sometimes only 1 minute? We would drive, for example, all the way, we'd carpool to San Francisco to go to meetings, and they would say because of the number of people wanting to have a public comment, they were only going to allow people to have 1 minute. And I kept wondering about all of that, and these were in the early days of my discovering the enormities of all that we face. Certainly, all process of understanding the global smart grid deployment, along with the operations of weather control worldwide. There was so much to assimilate, and then to suddenly realize how all of these other things could be happening, it started to make sense. So I worked hard to understand that concept, and then it became crystal clear. And it made it easier to decipher documents going forward, much easier, because I recognized that we are the enemy. And if conceptually you can understand that, which is most difficult to understand, we are on a battlefield. And we are being launched upon by every unimaginable technology that we're unaware of. And I want to bring this into the discussion, Yana, right now, because in the early days of really hitting the anti-smart meter movement, I was arrested at a protest because I could not understand why the media was not there. We were protesting the smart meters. There was nothing in our local reading material from the newspapers or from the radio programs about even a rollout of smart meters in Northern California. It was not a discussion at all. And again, during this time when I didn't understand how everything was operating, I finally was telling my husband, well, what if I got arrested? I mean, it's something I'd never dreamed of contemplating in my life. But what if I did do that? What would happen? Would the media cover this? Would it be anything significant? Because they were telling everybody that those people participating in the opposition of the smart meters were old, washed-up hippies from the 60s, and what do they know? And I'm not that visual appearance at all. I'm not a hippie at all. I'm an older grandmother and very conservative in the way I dress and present myself. And so I thought they could not lay that description on me. So with great thought, I thought, okay, I'm going to see what happens. And I chose a date that I would never forget, because as time goes by, you do forget more things as you fill your brain with more things that are unforgettable. And I chose the date that we were on a protest, Yana, and it was January the 11th of 2011. So 1/11/11. So I will never forget that date that I was arrested. And that is on YouTube, by the way, Deborah Tavares arrest. And you will hear me. Well, it ended up that YouTube went circulated worldwide. And here's a grandmother saying that you're killing my grandchildren with the radiation and the deployment of the smart meters on our homes. And suddenly I received a phone call from the New York Times and from the San Francisco Chronicle, and I was being interviewed by the local radio stations. And then suddenly I received a call from Pacific Gas and Electric, who I did not know at the time was run by Rothschild. They invited me to dinner meetings. I was not able to invite my husband because they said there was no room, and that I could come to a series of 3 meetings that they had prepared to have. And I went there and I found out that they were trying to sell the smart meter to all of us. Apparently we had been invited because those that were there were opposing the deployment, and we were making significant waves in opposing the smart meters. I did not know at the time the impact we were having worldwide on what ended up being quite a significant backlash worldwide with the meters. I can say to you that at the time that we discovered the meters were being deployed upon us here in Northern California by Rothschild, or AKA Pacific Gas and Electric, we were 75% deployed. That's how far they had gotten in a stealth silent weapons system on our homes. And so I was campaigning largely in the way in which I would sell homes back in the days that we were building. And my husband and I had many different signs made, the size of real estate signs, and I first started a website called refusesmartmeters.com. And I put those signs on any property for free. My husband would put them on posts, and we would go around. We would educate people on the meters, and we probably had about 250 signs throughout our area here in Northern California. And PG&E was shocked. They didn't know who was doing all of this, who was behind it. And I got a call one day from the San Francisco Chronicle asking me how I felt that I was being spied on by Pacific Gas and Electric, and I had no knowledge of that. But I told them that I was not surprised, because they were deploying a spy grid on all of our homes, and a grid that would slowly kill us in our homes. So why would I be surprised that they were spying on me and others, not just myself, but others as well? So what ended up happening was Rothschild cooked up a psychological program at the time through Vanderbilt University. And they decided to create an appeasement program for those that were up in arms against the deployment of the meters. They needed to slow down the activism opposing it, because we were really putting a dent in their ability across the country. Other people were saying, wait a minute, We don't want this. So they gave us the opt-out. We could opt out. We could either agree to have the smart meter or not have the smart meter. And that minimized the idea that there was a concern about it. If you could decide whether you wanted it or whether you didn't, it made it sound like not such a horrible thing. And it did slow down the activism for a short time. And and we always knew that was an appeasement plan, that there would be widespread forced deployment on other people as time went by, and that is exactly what happened. So all of this helped me to understand we don't have a government.
Right.
We don't have local government. We don't have county government. All the agencies within our counties and cities are all run through the corporate structure. And witnessing the horrific deployment of death across the country and the approval of the sustainable development plans in every city, in every county, not only in the United States, but worldwide, further not only indicated and proved that we were not only USA Inc., a corporation, by the way, listed on the New York Stock Exchange as a business, but that we were also Earth Inc. And again, that scope of understanding, Jana, as you can only imagine, was more devastating, I think, than anything else at that time for our team here at StopTheCrime.net and myself. So it launched me into really understanding the larger picture of the genocide plans. And at the time of the smart meters, too, I was learning about totalitarianism and technocracy. And honestly, in the beginning, I didn't even know what those words meant. I would hear discussions on that, and there were so many foreign words being used. There was a new vocabulary being developed. Neurolinguistic programming, as I now understand it. And something for all of you that are listening to look up. Why we sit there at meetings and we hear words that we don't question, we don't ask for a definition, and they roll over as being foreign, and we accept that. Well, don't accept that.
Right.
So let me talk to you about an icon I was hunting for, and this is significant. I was looking for some type of an icon to go along with a poster I created on totalitarianism through technocracy, which means total oppression through technologies. Total oppression. And I found something on the computer that was only the size of a postage stamp, and I had to squint to look at it. And it was a robot with a human lying slumped through its midsection of the robot, which was showing that they were destroying humans. And I discovered that this was called the Moloch of totalitarianism, and it was a memorial that was placed as a memorial to victims of oppression in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Wow.
Where this memorial is located. And it is a guillotine that is in the midsection of this robot, where it's holding a slumped human dead. And we actually went to Russia, and we ended up going, of course, to St. Petersburg. And we wanted to go to this cemetery, but we were not allowed. They wouldn't take us there. I wanted to see it in person. So I invite all of you to take a look at this robot. It's interesting that it would end up as a memorial in St. Petersburg, Russia, exposing such a novel idea now of robots and how humans are being replaced.
Is it called Moloch?
The Moloch of totalitarianism.
Yes.
And again, a memorial to victims of oppression. And I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce the name of the city correct, but it's Levashova. I'm going to spell it. in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Levashova.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Say that one more time.
Levashova.
Thank you so much, Anna.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to discuss totalitarianism because it's important to understand how all of the technology that has been given to us or that we have somehow or another gotten hold of is being used, and what is coming of all this technology. And you heard me initially discuss about the 5G and now becoming mobile.
Yes.
It's the technocracy, again, total oppression through technology's system that recognizes no limits to its power, surveillance, and authority. And the purpose is to strive to regulate every aspect of public and private life without regard for life itself. And it goes on to further discuss how this control of technologies will control the media, all politics, all economies, our speech. It engages in widespread use of terror and mass surveillance through regimes. And this is how regimes stay in political power, through all-encompassing propaganda campaigns. That's why I brought up the NASA war document and the Psy war through the CNN syndrome, which is what the purpose of the media is.
Deborah, if you don't mind, since you are there, before we move on to your concerns about grid and water, can you in short speak about NASA document, and then maybe some other time we can have another show to do it in depth, but kind of tell people what this NASA document says, kind of a summary.
Well, I will. And for those of you, too, that are listening, you can type in YouTube, Deborah Tavares, and the NASA document. I've done many past shows a long while ago about this in detail, but it needs to be revised, and I could think of nowhere I would rather do this than with you, Yana.
Thank you.
And people do need to understand what we are facing and how quickly all this is coming about. So I want to just say that it is diabolical. And when I first came across this, I was stunned, absolutely stunned. And I flipped through the various pages of this PowerPoint and could not believe what I was reading, quite frankly. And I called a number of people to go over some of the acronyms that I didn't understand. And I spent quite a long time going through this with a number of people. And I call it the NASA War Plan. However, it is called Future Strategic Issue, Future Warfare, circa 2025. And it talks about the capabilities of the enemy after next and ongoing worldwide technological revolutions and economic trends and potential nature of further terms of warfare. And again, I'll go over it briefly. I do have a flyer on stopthecrime.net where I've taken some high points of that document. I would probably choose to consider redoing some of those high points now, as there are many more points in that document that I should go through, and we will on another program. But again, I'll go over some of those points right now. I went over a little bit earlier on page 4 that, again, it was introduced by Dennis Bushnell, the chief NASA scientist of Langley Research Center. It encompasses the work and efforts of the U.S. Air Force, DARPA, the CIA, the FBI, Southern Command, Atlantic Command, the Australian Department of Defense, and many other corporate agencies. It talks about, on page 4, that this presentation is based in all cases upon existing trends, data, analysis, technologies. No pixie dust. Robots, cyborgs, and humans. It goes on to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, how humans have taken over and vastly shortened evolution, and they're going to redirect evolution. They talk about, on page 14, key future technologies will be automatic, robotic, everything. Automatic, robotic, everything. Genetic engineering before birth. They talk about, on page 67, again, robotics in the large, and how beneficial they are to the planet. They not only save lives, which again, neuro-linguistic programming, they're destroying lives, okay, that's the plan, but how they enhance affordability, they redefine risks, the threat to the environment, and enhance effectiveness. Absolutely, they enhance effectiveness. They go on to talk about, on page 35, how there will be the Internet of Things, bio and nano, and there will be brain of sea lamprey inserted, connected to body of robotic fish, an initial cyborg. There's a choo-choo, C-H-E-W, a flesh plant-eating robot that hunts and biodigests natural foods to live off the land. The choo-choo robot inventor, Stuart Wilkinson, exposes concern about the dangers of the robots eating humans.
Oh my goodness, Deborah, this is diabolical. This can only come out of the brain of Satan. This is absolute insanity.
Absolutely. And on page 43, they talk about the use of microdust weaponry, a mechanical analog to micron-sized mechanized dust, which I read earlier, which is distributed as an aerosol and inhaled into the lungs. The dust mechanically bores into lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. We're told that it is a wholly, meaning a completely new class of weaponry, which is legal. I'm going to go over a few other pertinent pages now, just because I'm discussing this and because we face this right now. On page 16 in that document, it talks about worldwide impacts of ongoing IT revolution upon society. And they tell us that there will be telecommuting, teleshopping, tele-entertainment, teletravel, teleeducation, telemedicine, telecommerce, telepolitics, and telesocialization. Now match that up, how they're accomplishing that right now, with social distancing and isolation, and closing down all contact with one another through going to meetings other than tele. And I want to add this right now because this is vitally important. I went to an institute that helps blind people that can't see. And I learned many things, and I have a number of YouTubes up on StopTheCrime.net where you'll still see my husband and I filming that institute visit that we took about a year ago. We learned about the enormous expectation of eye diseases and the enormity of the planned epidemic of blindness in this country by the millions. And in talking to these people, and in particular a blind man, which you'll see filmed on the website, I think it's called The Blind Guy, but if you scroll through our videos, you'll see that. But we learned that this is a plan, of course, to bring in virtual and augmented realities. We'll be blind. And so to prevent losing your eyesight, I'm understanding it's imperative through various ophthalmologists that we all wear sunglasses every single time we go outside. Every single time, sunglasses. Mm-hmm. Also, very, very important to order, if you do not have, the Blue Tech lenses to prevent disease and blindness. In other words, You can get blue tech lenses. Either you can buy them on Amazon to wear over your existing prescription glasses, or you can actually go to your ophthalmologist and have them put in a blue tech lens prescription into your eyewear. It's important that you consider this for all of your children as well. Blindness is the goal.
Wow.
It is a goal. And that is, of course, being furthered by the illusion that we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions and transition to LED lighting only. I have a YouTube video up about LED lights, a silent weapons system. Covered that a few years ago, actually, and how the headlights now in new cars damage your eyes when you're night driving. Mm-hmm. Many people will be uncomfortable with night driving, and they may not understand why. Also, many of the replacements of the lighting in the cities now are also LED lighting. We have an onslaught of intentional blinding of all of us and reduced eyesight of all of us. So that is an opportunity now to preserve your eyesight as long as possible, and you have to learn as much as you can about the effects of the damaging intention to our eyesight. So if any of you that are listening come up with any other methods that we can preserve our eyesight longer, of course, diet and vitamins, good nutrition, not looking at your screens 4 hours before you return to bed, or go to bed, many things, and too many to go over right now, because right now I want to jump into water and discuss the intention of the infrastructure.
Yes, so let me just hear, last month there are 2 dams broke in Michigan. We made a video, Michigan being punished for protesting against lockdown. It was Titabawasi River where 2 dams have broke. So that goes along with our last show, Deborah, where you explained that these dams will be breaking and there is a purpose behind it. So go ahead.
Yes, definitely. I have a video up, series of videos up on stopthecrime.net of my presentation in the UK about a year ago. And I since did another series here in the United States where I inserted more detail. And I'm going to start out describing why we have dams and reservoirs in the first place when we never needed to. This was an enormous concept also to wrap our heads around. But here's what we need to wrap our heads around. Water never needed to be transported through a network of dams and rivers and aqueducts because we have primary water. Yes. And the reason that the LA aqueduct was put in place was so that the water racketeering could put meters on the water. They could control land values. They could control farming. They could not control that if they put in a series of deep or not so deep wells and literally transported water through a labyrinth of underground plumbing, as Muammar Gaddafi did in Libya.
Right.
He had what they called the Great Man-Made River Project, the great wonder, the 8th wonder of the world, and he was able to deliver by using the profits from the sale of their natural resources, such as petroleum, to put in this enormous, wonderful way in which to get water to the people. Now, it's most important to understand primary water, for people that can get to it and drink it, have higher IQs.
Wow.
So when you think of how water works, and you realize that there's the secondary water supply and the primary water supply, we've only all been taught about the secondary water supply. Before I did not know that water came from anywhere else other than rain and snowmelt. That's how they benchmark our water tables. That's how they tell us, oh, the lakes are dropping and there's not as much snowpack. We're going to have water shortages this coming year. Well, that's all a part of the scientific fraud of those that control us through misinformation. And we learned that primary water is a renewable. Water is a renewable. It's made down below the mantle of the earth. And I go into much detail in a video I have up on YouTube called Primary Water Explained. Again, Primary Water Explained. So here we have this setup of the secondary water system being transported worldwide by literally ground-based rivers, streams, lakes, captured into reservoirs. And what is important to understand is the impoundment of the water, the weight of the water on those geographical locations causes slippage. And I termed it fake lakes make quakes. I soon discovered, and our team discovered with research, that Hoover Dam, which is the process of Lake Mead, when Lake Mead was created, and by the way, by Rothschild, there were earthquakes after that that never were there before. And in looking worldwide at the damage of reservoirs and fake lakes that make quakes, and finding out that a number of dams and reservoirs literally were breached because of quakes, now we have the additional breaching of atmospheric rivers from the enormity of the weaponized weather programs, such as what happened in Missouri, as you just discussed with everybody, Anna. So what we have, and what we know that we're told in the documents, is the effect of the global infrastructure not being able to withstand the increased climate change. That is our fault, they say, because we have not reduced our greenhouse gas emissions enough to change the weather. Now, if anyone can fully really believe that, sadly, we can see that most people have. That's what our kids are being educated to in school. And when I think about the graduates of 2020 and how they're, sorrowfully being given diplomas by a social distancing celebrations, I think in terms of not graduates, but indoctorates.
Right. Kids
that have been indoctrinated in school. And they have been taught about climate change, and they tell them it's too many people using too much stuff. So here we have a setup of drinking water distribution that goes to our cities and municipalities that is very toxic, because the water, of course, in the secondary water supply comes down through the toxic atmosphere, where we have bomb testing, Fukushima, chemtrailing, flows over the lands where there have been toxic fertilizers used, and then flows into these cauldrons called reservoirs, and where more toxins are added, and then that is then transported into our municipal water supply systems, and we drink it.
Yes. If you would speak now about the grid and a danger that we are in, almost immediate danger, how they want to control our power grid and bring us to maybe 1700s,
Yeah.
Can you please address that?
It's interesting, and I'm glad that you directed me to that, because for many of you that have not read 1 Second After, it's a book, I would recommend that you do. It would be an eye-opener of what to expect with a grid failure. And the grid failure doesn't necessarily need to be nationwide. They will select certain geographical locations to force relocation of people who no longer have power. And particularly if you live in a rural setting in the country where you rely on well for water, and the power is out, as we experienced many days in 2019 here in Northern California, when Rothschild PG&E turned off our power. They called it a public safety power shutdown. And we called it, they called it PSBS, PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutdown, and we call it PSBS. But this is extremely important, and I'm going to go over that now, and we'll go through this further on another show. But I would recommend right now that everybody have a power outage party. Make fun out of it. Tape all of your light switches so you can't inadvertently switch them on, and go without power for a few days, as we had to do here in Northern California due to the fires and the intentional shutdown of the grid, because they've sectionalized the grid now, and they can shut your area off at will. They not only can do that from sectionalizing the power and distribution system, but of course they can also turn your power off by your smart meters individually on your homes. But let's get back to my huge concern, and yours as well, and the power party that you need to have. So turn your power off and live in your homes for a few days without any power, and make a list of all of the things that you will need to survive without power. Certainly a generator is most important. They now have propane heaters that you can put inside your home for heat. We had to do that because it was so cold during the October and November fires here in Northern California last year, and we had no power. And fortunately, we thought, well, I will tell you, we thought we had prepared pretty well for power shutdowns, but we found out that we needed many more items to survive the next power outage. And I would suggest that all of you, where you are monetarily capable, to figure that out on your own. We can make recommendations, and we will on a later show. But in the meantime, have a power outage party and get your most inexpensive essential items immediately.
Yes.
I can't underscore that enough. So I'm going to go over a statewide summary report on climate change assessment. Now, this is a California report, but this applies worldwide. And I'm going to talk about what they're saying climate change is going to do to affecting energy and how that will affect the infrastructure. And they say that climate change impacts to the energy system. Climate change conditions will affect the energy system in many ways by changing energy demands, changing performance of energy delivery systems, and by direct risks to the infrastructure. Now, I want to say this. Everyone listening, you're going to be confronted with some type of a weaponized weather event coming on very soon. And very likely your areas will suffer power outages, all planned, because remember, they control the weather. They don't have to hit you with these type of diabolical weaponized weather assaults, but they are. So they can cause the power to go out just by switching or de-energizing grid areas, and they will. And it's important to know how climate change, they tell us in these documents, are already affecting energy demand for space heating. So again, I told you I was cold here. I was cold here. There are many areas in this country that are unlike Northern California that are very cold. So imagine, if you will, the kind of interior space heating you will need in order to be warm when they turn the power off, and they will. And they go on to say, regardless of whether the annual average of household energy demand increases under climate change conditions, the projected increases in peak electricity demand in hot and cold months during the year have important implications to the electric system. Climate change warming has projected to affect also peak electricity demand. They go on to say that projected increases in peak demands, whether it be summer or winter, is associated with varying ranging temperatures that pose risks to energy infrastructure, and that it will exceed the capacity, listen carefully to this, the climate change risks will exceed the capacity of existing substations and distribution circuits. So they're going to blame climate change and weather events on why you have your lights turned off. I want to say this right now, and I'm working to get this back up. I had a YouTube video up, and it was just recently taken down. We'll work to get it back up. We may change the name of it so that they don't recognize it. But it was entitled, Lights Out, More Power Shutdowns Planned. Only renewables allowed, tricked into microgrids. And I will explain that quickly because I want to get into more of what we're going to face as the lights go out. And they've been experimenting with lights out worldwide for many decades. And the enormity of the plan will cost millions and millions of people their lives. So lights out, more power shutdowns planned. Yes, they are planned through increased weaponized weather events. And I was just reading to you some of the points out of the climate change document. And only renewables are allowed, so I will explain this to you. We're transitioning from the system that we have with the use of hydroelectricity, and they're telling us we're transitioning off of nuclear distribution for electricity as well. And in fact, the Diablo nuclear facility just south of San Francisco is expected to be completely out of commission by the year 2025. So you may ask, well, why are they taking that Diablo, means devil, out of commission by 2025? Well, just so happens after they built that massively expensive nuclear facility, they discovered it was on an unidentified fault that they had not found before construction. And so they're going to take it down, and it will be decommissioned by 2025. In the meantime, it's part of the power mix that Rothschild, PG&E, which is also Southern California Edison, and all of the utilities throughout the entire country, they're using that nuclear energy as a electricity distribution part of how we receive our electricity right now. And I sat in on meetings of a company called Sonoma Clean Power, and that's the name of an organization here in Northern California, Sonoma Clean Power. And they are promoting only clean power. And they said that they would not disclose that part of their power mix was still from the Diablo nuclear facility, that they would not say that they didn't have to say that in their advertisements to all of the people that they're asking to sign up for clean power. Because years ago, PG&E wanted to build a nuclear site out on Bodega Head. Many of you may have seen the movie The Birds with Alfred Hitchcock. Well, that was in the town of Bodega, but Bodega Head was actually on the coast, where there are many faults. And PG&E was in the process of building a nuclear facility there. They had already started construction, and some persistent, brave people continued to oppose it, and they finally shut PG&E down from building that. And there's a huge hole still there on Bodega Head here in Northern California. Mm-hmm. So they were able to prevent Rothschild from putting a nuclear facility there at that time. So what do I want to talk about with the power going out? You think we have anarchy in the streets now that is being created by the questionable events of the Floyd situation? You think we have a social-driven anarchy now? Just wait until we have massive power shutdowns. I'm going to go over some of the events that have occurred when there have been power shutdowns. And it's important to understand that power outages are very common during periods of civil unrest.
Right.
and that the LA riots, which I was involved in, I was there in Southern California, and we had 2 businesses that were broken into and looted back in 1992. And in the New York blackouts, there was tremendous rioting, and social unrest creates conditions for rioting, looting, and widespread destruction, and creates conditions that law enforcement are unprepared to deal with. So this is what we're going to face in the very near future. This will become another piece of the puzzle for the greater lockdown and bringing in martial law. Will be that they will tell us the effects of us not reducing our greenhouse gas emissions enough to stop the weather from changing. Now, I hope everybody thinks about that carefully. That is a massive psyop, scientific fraud, and that's what we're being sold. And that's what our children have been taught in school. So they talk about how the riots that I experienced in LA were also racial tensions, which flared into more than a week of rioting. And in the end, there were about 53 people that were killed and more than 2,000 people injured, and 11,000 were arrested, and over $1 billion in property damage of destroyed property occurred back in the LA riots. The looters raided the shops just like they're doing now, destroying buildings and setting fires that melted power lines, and transformers were ultimately destroyed. And South Central Los Angeles power grid we had lights out. And in New York, in 1977, there was also a mass power outage that compelled citizens to take advantage of the vulnerability of the stores and businesses, and they were also looted as well. We're seeing this happen in our cities right now. Back in New York, they looted many stores on the stretch of Broadway in Brooklyn. There were 134 stores that were looted, and 45 stores back then were lit on fire. There were over 1,000 fires. Many of also melted power lines, so they had a double benefit. They were taking down the grid at the same time.
Yes, Deborah, we have 3 minutes left before our 2 minutes now. So we need to do another show. If you don't mind, you will be so kind to do another show because we have so much to tell, but now we have only 2 minutes left. Can you quickly...
Camera's memory is what it is.
Yes, our camera's memory has 1 hour, 15 minute limit.
We got plenty of time, but the camera
I don't blame it. I want to forget everything too.
Yes. What I want to say really quickly before we end is this. Deborah Tavares is taking in a lot of information. She has studied federal documents, Rockefeller documents, Rothschild documents, and this is an enormous work for humanity to go through these things, take it all in. This is a poisonous, mind-poisonous material that people like Deborah and she herself has to go through, study, and then kind of process it herself, and then find a way to speak to humanity and educate humanity, neighbors, so we can do something about this. So I would like all of you to please appreciate her work, support her work. Tell me, Deborah, tell them again really quickly your websites.
Yes, please again subscribe to stopthecrime.net. Tap the bell notifications so you will be notified when we post new videos on our YouTube channel, and when we post to our community posts, as well as go to primarywater.org. Please teach your children that we are not running out of water, and that the world is not what it appears, and sadly what they have been taught. Right now, while they are not in school, gently start nudging them towards the truth.
Right.
They deserve that, because children are going to have massive emotional and...
Yes, Deborah, please tell us your closing statements now.
Okay, because all of us are hearing so much about the Center for Disease Control And their advice to all of us on handling COVID, it's most important to understand that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is a private for-profit corporation doing business, and the business is making vaccinations along with the pharmaceuticals. And the CDC is not a government health advocacy organization. It is a corporation listed on Dun and Bradstreet and headquartered in the state of Georgia. And the CDC has strong ties to the pharmaceutical industry. The CDC recommendations, again, are influenced by its fiscal health of their corporation and making money. Also, most important, because the governors, our state governors, have given authority to all of our local public health agencies to literally prescribe what orders, what public health stay-at-home orders and social distancing orders we must abide by. Keep in mind at all times, 100% of square footage from restaurants and other buildings was taken away at the beginning of COVID for non-essential business, and people will get back only 20% or 25% of their floor space when the orders come out and people can reopen. And this is to be a gift. This is to be a reprieve. Of course, that is absurd. But again, as far as the state public health institutions, they are also all private, for-profit corporations doing business as well. And these medical clinics frequently share their records with the state and public health departments, which again are also for-profit corporations. Your states are private for-profit corporations. And the public health departments are also doing business and listed on Dun and Bradstreet. And they receive monetary compensation from the Center of Disease Control to perform its function. So it's important to understand that state public health departments and recommendations and actions are influenced by the fiscal health of their corporation. And that's why in the beginning of the program, I was attempting to discuss that we are a corporation doing business as a country. We're USA Inc. and we are Earth Inc. So again, I would ask everybody, please go to stopthecrime.net, subscribe, tap our bell notification, and also understand the truth about water. The best news ever is that we have plenty of water. We're not running out. And you can increase your IQ by knowing the kind of water that you must now consider obtaining. Yes. Again, I want to thank both of you, but Jana, for having me on the program today.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And really quickly, I want to say a few things. For example, those tests that are required for all medical workers now, anybody who works in a hospital, it doesn't matter in which position. It can be even someone who cleans hospital, but you work for a hospital, you are required to take a COVID test, and the one done by swab, that they take it up your nose, really high up into your cavity, right by the pineal gland almost, okay, causes some people enormous headaches. They're describing it as headaches as they have never had in their life. That's from our friend that is working in a hospital and was forced by National Guard, who just showed up in a hospital unannounced, and they came and performed forced COVID tests in Florida on the workers of a hospital. He ended up with headache as he has never experienced in his life. That's one thing to keep in mind, that you can still refuse. It was mandatory if you want to stay employed, but if you don't want to stay employed or you don't need to be employed, or you can change your employment, you can refuse it. So it's basically forced. If a lot of people really rely, they have education, they are nurses, they are what is it called? Well, I don't know now, but anyway, nurses, phlebotomists, doctors, they have education, they rely on their jobs to live. and they're forced to take these tests. That's for medical workers right now, in Florida at least. And then also churches in some areas around here who are reopening. Of course, they're reopening under strict measures with social distancing, masks, and compulsory temperature checks that some deacons of churches will be performing on those who want to return to church, which is absolutely ridiculous. So we can see that these totalitarian ways that COVID has brought us are not going away. So I just wanted to say this. So I don't know if you heard about this, Deborah, but this is what news I got today from our friends that work in church, from friends that work in hospital, and that was very disturbing to see, to hear.
Yes. Well, this is why I would again refer everyone to that Rockefeller Foundation National COVID-19 Testing Action Plan.
Yes.
You will find that without exception, everyone will be forcibly tested, and you will be monitored and tracked. And this is a program, again, that I learned when I was at an IEEE meeting. I have a video up. It's entitled IEEE, that's I and 3 E's, meaning International Electrical and Electronic Engineers, IEEE, the Technology of Death. Please go to that on YouTube, IEEE Technology of Death. We were told back during that meeting, that conference that we attended, that every single thing, living or manufactured, would be tracked on the face of this planet, from birth or manufacturing to end of life or the death of humans. Everything would be tracked, and they're on track to the plan that they've set in place many decades ago. So we are going to find that we're going to not be able to go back to work unless we submit to these tests, sadly.
Yes.
I don't know what to say to people, Yana, about this.
I don't know, Deborah. I don't know what to say, how to proceed, other than if we as a majority of humanity wake up and do not allow this, like we will say no. But, majority of people, I'm still seeing them in masks and standing in these circles and lines that they put up, and, they just cooperate. If there was
the problem, of course, too, and I think many of those that are listening right now are recognizing that you are considered a terrorist if it appears that you're threatening someone else's life over giving them COVID.
Right.
I see a number of people being accused of killing someone else that is so horrified about COVID. In fact, I must say that I personally have a horrific situation where I have a teleconferencing grandchild. We are not allowed to see our grandchild because of the fear of the mother that the child will get COVID. And I will tell you also, I refuse to have a telecommuting or a situation with my grandson until they are hardwired. So I guess I would leave the program by saying right now, more important than ever, make certain that while you are at home, and you will be at home, and you will be telecommuting everything, hardwire everything up as quickly as you can. Do not have Wi-Fi in your home.
Yes.
Hardwire your computers, everything. Again, wear those glasses that I discussed, but do not have wireless, even deck phones, where you can pick up your phone and wander around the house. We've tested those. Those are as bad as cell phones. Keep your cell phones outside, wrapped up in Mylar. Cut your infiltration of frequencies, because right now we are being imprisoned in our homes. This is a plan. And frequencies can and are amped up through the smart grid.
Yes.
And cell towers are amped up usually between 2 and 4 in the morning. And we are being radiated. We are being murdered in the comforts of our own homes. We're imprisoned, and we're being a kind of a way of being electrocuted.
Yeah, are you still on lockdown in your county in California, Deborah?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
well that is, so sad. So are people in Washington State, over, in Florida where we are. This is now it's opened up, so we are feeling a little bit more normalcy. However, as I was explaining to you, that compulsory testing right now of all workers of hospitals and medical centers, and masks are still on. You cannot enter Costco without mask.
Right. Right.
So those measures are staying, and now they're talking about second wave of COVID, and strangely warning about all children, maybe will affect children, as Fauci was explaining. So I'm afraid what the next plan is, but we can discuss more on the next show, because I know that's a very long show. And
Well, we will. And I had just one final comment, if I may.
yes,
With all of the rioting and the protesting that we're seeing, not only nationwide in the United States, but worldwide, and the fact that social distancing and mask wearing has not occurred in many of those protests, they're now saying that they're concerned now of increased COVID
yes,
as a result of that. And of course, that is another way to eliminate even the ability to get out and protest, which
yeah.
we'll cover more of that on a later show.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming. I know this is a difficult job. I know many do not understand how difficult job this is, to be learning information, processing it, and then find ways to educate people. So thank you so much again, Deborah, for coming. Thank you all for listening. May God bless you, and stay strong and learn, study. Knowledge is power. And we hope we help you here with all these shows and sharing of everything that we know. Thank you so much, and you have a great evening.